So what are the things to think about whenever you're designing a mural or a piece of street art? I know you want to be really just excited to do whatever you want to, but what are some of the things that you need to think about when you're sort of designing for a mural to make sure that you're being efficient and effective as possible? That is what we're going to talk about today, so buckle up. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so that you're notified whenever I do videos like this. Now let's get started. On a side note, don't mind the blue tongue throughout the video. I was eating a ton of snow cones earlier, and that is why my tongue is blue. Hopefully it's not too distracting. Now let's get to it. So let's say you just went to a wall space, and you like the wall, you get permission to paint it. Now you're at your studio or home and you break out the sketch pad or iPad and you're designing. What are some of the things that you need to think about whenever you're sort of trying to design a piece of artwork for that space? So there are 4 things that I think about when I'm in design mode, thinking about designing artwork for a space that I've seen and thinking about how can I be as efficient as possible. That is time, equipment and supplies, space and environment, and budget. And before we get to those, I want to say that when you're designing, you want to design with your heart first and then go back and think with your head and sort of revamp and change things up. Mainly because you want to sort of design what you really want to. You want to design something that you're going to be proud of. And then you want to sort of think about, okay, this is how I can switch it up to make sure it fits the space. It sort of came from one of my favorite movies, Finding Forrester. Basically, this is the clip.
You write your first draft with your heart, and you rewrite with your head. The first key to writing is to write, not to think.
So now let's get to time. And what I mean by time is how much time do you have to allocate to that mural, to that project? So when you're designing, you have to think about how much time is this going to take for me to complete. You can have a design where you're like, okay, this is going to require 20 working hours, 20 hours of me outside basically painting. And if you only have access to that space 4 hours a day, guess what? That is at a minimum a 5-day project. And do you have 5 days to spend on this project? Or, this is a 20-hour project, but you have access 24 hours a day at that job site. So now you're like, okay, I can do this project in 1 day, if I work really hard, or I can split it up into 2 days because I have access to that space. So when we're thinking about design, think about, okay, how much access do we have to that space? How long can we spend at that space? How long will this mural take? So when we're thinking about design, think about, how complex is this design? How much detail am I putting in this design? And how long will it take for me to complete that project? Sometimes you may need to reduce the complexity or reduce the amount of detail to make sure that you're fitting within that allotted amount of time that you have. Everyone's different. You may have kids, you may have a significant other you need to spend time with, you may have, a full-time job. So thinking about time is really important whenever we're sort of thinking about design. So the next is equipment. What type of equipment do you need to complete that design that you're sort of creating? Do you need a lift? Do you need a ladder? Are you using a sprayer? Sometimes when we're creating a design, we have certain elements in there that require certain pieces of equipment or certain supplies. If you're doing a straight line, you want to make sure that line is straight. So, you're having to sort of find equipment to sort of make that straight line. And then how do you sort of create that straight line when you're trying to execute it? Are you having a friend come over? Or are you sort of, taping one in with a string, taping the other in with a string? If you can't do that because, the wall is too tall in this area and too small in this area, or the texture of the wall is not right, you have to think about what type of supply you will need on a project based on that design that you are creating. There are many times when I have a design that has a really heavy blend on a large area and I want to use my sprayer, but I have to keep the job area really clean because I can't mess it up. So now I'm having to sort of figure out, okay, how can I do this with rollers and brushes rather than, a larger sort of scale equipment that can get really messy. So when you're designing, you really have to think about, okay, if I add this element, what type of equipment or supply do I need for that space? What type of equipment or supply do I need to sort of execute that element in my design so that, it comes out the way I want to? or do I have to sort of scale it back or change it up a little bit because I may not have that piece of equipment or supply to actually do that. The next area is space and environment. Where is it? What type of environment is around it? What type of surroundings do you have to work in? Is it an office space where you may have to sort of really keep this job site clean, or is it outside, on the side of a wall in an alleyway where you can get the ground kind of messy, you can spill paint and it won't really matter. You can use messy equipment and it won't really make a big difference. What type of wall space is it? Is it brick? Is it sort of new drywall construction? Is it concrete? Is it sort of like this textured area? Is it really high up to where it's not going to be eye level with someone walking or passing by? Maybe it's above eye level to where now you have to have a ladder, but you have to design it to where people are going to look at it from farther away. So when I'm designing, I'm sort of looking at my design saying, okay, in this space on this textured wall, I can't really use brushes. I have to use spray medium or a sprayer because the wall is too textured. Or it could be inside and I can't use spray paint. I have to use brushes, I have to use rollers, and that will dictate sometimes some of the elements I put in my design, because sometimes things are easier when I'm able to use spray paint and some things are easier when I'm able to use the brushes or the rollers. Another big thing is what type of obstacles are there in that space and environment and surrounding. How many windows do you have? How many doors do you have on that wall? Are there utility boxes? Or what sort of obstacle do you have to sort of take into consideration when you're designing, because you don't want really detailed elements but they're not going to be there because a window is right there, or a gate is right there, or a door, or something that is corrugated, or just makes your sort of design a little bit less impactful because there's so many things on this wall space. So when you're sort of looking at a space and you're sort of considering what type of design you want to sort of create, you have to think about, okay, if I add this element to this part of my design, this is how it will fall on that wall. So thinking about space and environment and surroundings, what that wall looks like, obstacles, the different sort of textures on that wall, you really have to think about that when you're designing. And the last is budget. Do you have the budget to compensate or to allocate to some of these changes or adaptations you need to make based on the wall size or the texture of the wall, the equipment that you need, the supplies that you need? What type of budget do you have? Do you have the budget to sort of spend an entire week on this project? If it falls within budget, that is great. Then you're able to compensate. You have to get this big piece of equipment or these new supplies. But if not, how do I make this design sort of fit within the parameters of the equipment that I have, the budget that I have, the space that I'm painting in? So budget does play a role whenever you're designing, because it plays a role in the equipment and supplies and other things that you really need. So in the end, those are the 4 things that I think about whenever I'm designing for a space. Basically thinking, okay, what do I really want to paint? Because I want to be excited about going to that space, that job site, and just painting. But then I have to think about those different areas, and do I need to make some adjustments so that I'm able to have fun on the project, or make sure this project goes really smoothly, efficiently, effectively, and has an impact that I want. So that is basically why I sort of take into account those 4 areas whenever I'm in the studio with my iPad or Sketchpad, basically just sort of doodling and drawing different ideas. And basically over time you will learn exactly how to combine those, so that when you're designing at the beginning based on some of those parameters. You'll start to design with your heart and then your head at the same time, and be at that intersection where your design is really impactful, you really love it, and it worked for that space. So hopefully you like this video in terms of just learning about how I do murals, what I think about whenever I'm sort of trying to design for a mural. If you like the video, definitely check out some of the other ones that I do have on this How to Paint Murals series. And like I said, like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so that you're notified whenever I do videos like this. Thank you.